to know that he is our solid rock. Go ahead and take a seat. You are, I believe, about to just have a great treat. Tonight we get to hear from John and Amy Edwards. They're going to come on up. They have together last fall, I believe it was, taught a marriage series class, and that was part of what drew us to ask them to be here tonight. But John is a professional trainer, consultant, and author. Amy has done some interesting things with head trauma in the past, I understand. That's really interesting. I might need your help. She is also a preschool teacher, which is part of how I have been able to meet Amy. And I have myself experienced John's amazing ability to communicate. And as Pastor Scott and I were going, who should we ask to speak? John and Amy came up, and we just knew, based on their love for marriages and their ability to communicate, that they would just be perfect tonight. And so, John and Amy Edwards.
Thank you. Well, thank you. That was a very kind introduction. I am so very appreciative. It is great to see you all. Thank you for donating your such precious, valuable time tonight in the pursuit of healthier marriages. As indicated, my name is John Edwards. This is my lovely bride, Amy. She'll introduce herself in a minute. I have the honor and the privilege of training leaders around the world. I had just gotten back. You might be wondering, well, you're looking down the list of all the speakers that are going to be doing the seminar, and you're thinking, that's a list of who's who here at Chapel Springs. You get to my name, and it's like, who's he? Well, let me tell you how I got here. I had just gotten back from training some leaders in England, and Pastor Heather came up to me. She said, John, how do you feel about free speech? I said, Heather, I'm a patriot. I feel very strongly about free speech. She said, good, I want you to give one. I'm not likely going to fall for that a second time. But in any case, here I am. I'm really honored and privileged and looking forward to having some fun with you tonight. Amy?
Good evening. Am I hitting the microphone okay here? I'm just going to give a little background on myself. I grew up in a very small town in upstate New York at the foothills of the Adirondacks. If anyone's ever seen Hee Haw, we would be one of those towns that they say salud to. For those of you who don't know the show, the high school that my son goes to has more people in it than my hometown did. So, real small area. John and I met in college, and we got married. Life was great. We were both working. I was the program director for a large brain injury rehabilitation program. We could just get up and do what we wanted. Oh, movie starts in 10 minutes. Let's leave now. Who needs previews? Life was great. And then child number one came along. Now, don't get me wrong. I love my children. But it changed our lives drastically. For two people who did what we wanted, when we wanted, it totally changed things. First of all, I felt like I was the only one in the world who could take care of my child, even better than her father could. And I didn't want to just jump to do things anymore. I was still working at the time, and it was a real rough time. And then child number two came along. I was still working. It became a very difficult time in our relationship as I tried to work, raise children, and sometimes pay attention to my husband. So this was a real difficult time. And this is also a time when, this is when I met the Lord and came to accept Jesus. Well, then child number three came along, and I just couldn't do this work outside the home anymore. So I left the typical workforce, and I was a stay-at-home mom, transitioned into doing daycare. Child number four came along, and I was very fortunate. The Lord blessed us. I was able to work in brain injury again in a home office, so I was able to be home with my kids all the time. I did take a break for about a year and a half. I taught second grade because I also have an education degree. We moved a couple times and went back to traumatic brain injury rehab. Basically, 4 kids later, 4 homes later, 4 moves later, and 5 or 6 careers later, here I am in Northern Virginia teaching preschool.
All right. Thank you. Hey, we know that marriage is challenging, and so while we're going to have a little fun and some laughter, we certainly recognize that marriage is a very challenging thing. If you think about it, there are so many elements in the world today that come against the traditional marriage format. It's a constant battle in the element of marriage. But we believe God has a plan. He has a powerful plan for you and for your marriage and for those of you who intend to get married. And so if you're struggling tonight, we want to give you some hope, some inspiration, and some information that we hope will help you to move your marriage to a next level. And so we just recognize that marriage is challenging. In fact, I remember a speaker once announcing that marriage is like getting a midnight call. You get the ring and then you wake up. It's absolutely no doubt at all that marriage is challenging. We're going to talk not only about the problem that leads into some of the challenges in marriage, but what are some things that we can actually do about it? What are some things we can actually do about it? And, you know, the problem with marriage is sometimes we just simply say the wrong things. Sometimes we use the wrong words. I understand that sometimes it's accidental. It just sort of comes out and you're wondering, how do I back up that bus and take it back? And sometimes it's a little too late. Whenever I think about uttering the wrong words in certain situations without thinking, I'm reminded of the story of the man who used to always go out on the porch whenever his wife sang. If she was singing in the kitchen, doing the dishes, he'd go out on the porch. If she was in the shower, taking a shower and singing, he'd go out on the porch. Well, after this had been going on for quite a while, she finally decided to ask him, honey, why is it every time I sing, you go out on the porch? And he looked up at her without thinking, and he said, because I won't want the neighbors to think I'm beating you. Sometimes in a marriage situation, we just say the wrong things. Marriage is challenging. Listen, one of the things that I want you to understand is that my lovely bride, Amy, and I have been happily married for 19 years. In fact, this September, we're going to celebrate our 28th year anniversary. I'm going to pause because some of you are still doing the math. What we want to be vulnerable with you today is that we're not standing before you as a happily married couple that have figured some things out. We have had some very, very challenging times. The early years of our marriage were very, very difficult. I had a lot of growing up to do, not a lot of role modeling that I could reflect on and recognize in terms of how to be a husband or how to be a father even. And so we just had a lot of work that had to happen in our marriage. My friends, marriage is a lot of work. It is a lot of work. Whenever I talk to folks about marriage, I oftentimes get that response, you know, John, what you're talking about, that's a lot of work you're asking me to do. And my response usually is yes. Having a good marriage is a lot of work. Living through a bad marriage is even more work. Who knows what I'm talking about? So, either way you go, we've got a commitment to make in terms of being able to navigate the art of being in a good marriage. And so we do want to share with you some things relative to that as we go through our time together. All right, let's jump right in and talk a little bit about the problem. The problem is this. Whoever said that marriage is a 50-50 proposition was really bad at math. Because if you go into a relationship with that kind of a mathematical equation, it will, I guarantee you, be a tremendous struggle. Because here's what a 50-50 proposition does. It says that I will bring 50% to the table, you will bring 50% to the table. But here's what the brain does in that kind of an equation. The brain says, I will bring 50% to the table, you will make me happy. We got to be really careful with that proposition because God did not put another human being on this earth who can make you happy. I don't think he said that in the Bible. In fact, I think he referred to things like a helpmate, and I will give you a partner, right? He didn't say that I'm going to give you someone who's going to replace the joy that I give you. No. He said, I'm going to give you a companion. And so when we go into a marriage relationship expecting and putting that kind of pressure on someone that they're going to fulfill our every need, we're inevitably going to be disappointed. And so that's part of the problem. Part of the problem is that marriage is not about 50-50. In fact, if you were here last week and heard Pastor Scott's wonderful message, it was about what we give in the relationship, not what we expect to take out of the relationship. I won't ask you to raise your hands because this isn't about embarrassing anyone, but I would bet you that if I were to ask you how many of you would die for your spouse, people would raise their hands. So my real question to you, and I still don't want you to raise your hand, is how many of you will live for your spouse? Whoever said marriage is 50-50 was really, really bad at math. The second thing we have to understand is this. Men and women are very, very different. There you go. Good night. See you later. Men and women are very, very different. God made us so incredibly different, right? You know how this works. In fact, the research tells us that we are socially attracted to people who communicate the same way we do. Socially attracted to people who communicate the same way we do. So think about that for a minute. That means that when you've got spare time and you want to go hang out, with your best bud, you're hanging out with someone who communicates in a similar way to you. They're easy to be around, aren't they? They don't require a lot of work. Those are the people we're socially attracted to. We want to spend time with them. Relational psychologists tell us that we are romantically attracted to, well, good, we've got the right crowd. You guys have seen the movie. That's exactly right. We're romantically attracted to our opposites. So anytime you're going to bring two people together who are very different, you can bet you've got a ripe recipe for a couple of intense marital dialogues. Men and women are very, very different. Let me tell you a little bit around the science when it comes to the usage of our words. The science tells us this, that men use between 15 and 20,000 words a day. Men use between 15 and 20,000 words a day. Women use between 25 and 30,000 words a day. In fact, there was a Time magazine article, and it says this, and I quote, "Relationships are the psychological equilibrium for women. Women use conversation to build relationships." Here's the rest of the quote. "Men use talk to find solutions, thereby ending conversation." I'm going to hit you with that again because it's really, really important information. Relationships are the psychological equilibrium for women. Women use conversation to build relationships. Men use talk to find solutions, thereby ending conversations. I shared with you that the very beginning of our marital relationship was quite a struggle. This was one of the reasons it was such a struggle. Early in my career, Amy and I have a consulting speaking company, and we've had it for quite some time, and we were doing really well at the height of the organization when we were living in New York. And I would rent myself out to companies and organizations to help them solve their problems. It was what I did then and what I enjoy doing today, and so it was really a lot of fun. And as Amy indicated, she ran a 120-bed neurological rehab program. Now, if you've ever been the boss of anything, you know it can be lonely at the top. I would come home at the end of the day, and she would say, "How's your day, dear?" And I would say, "You guys listening in?" "Yeah," I would just simply say, "Fine." And then she would want to talk some more. Why? I've used up my entire inventory of 15,000 words. She wants to have a conversation. She's got inventory left, right? So she continues to chat, and she's talking about her day, and she's talking about challenges at work, because you can't talk to people at work when you're the boss about challenges at work. And she's talking about all of these things, and I do what any red-blooded American man would do. I quickly figure it out and then interrupt her. And then I interject the solution. I solve the problem for her. I don't know why. We're then having a fight. It escapes me entirely because, quite frankly, I'm not even charging her for the advice. I had no idea what the problem here was. When things got really bad with our relationship, we had to go get help. And when we went to get help, that's when I learned that very same quote I just shared with you, and it had such an impact on my life, I memorized it. Because that's when I realized she's not having a conversation to solve a problem. She's having a conversation to build a relationship with the man that she married. She's looking to have dialogue. Isn't it funny that when we were dating, I was way more willing to have dialogue then? All of a sudden, I got the ring and I woke up. A year into the marriage, she's wanting to have dialogue, and my objective is, can I solve the problem before the commercial is over? I know you know what I'm talking about. Listen, I tell people, TiVo and DVR saved my life. Be able to pause that bad boy? Yes, honey, go ahead. I'm not missing anything. So one of the pivotal things we have to understand about communication and the way we use our words is that the intent behind the dialogue is very different for men and women. And so I had to learn when it was time to sit and listen and build a relationship through a conversation. She also learned a bit about when to turn on that solution-solving button of mine and set me free. She'd sit down and go, honey, I want you to help me fix this one. And I'd be like, I was like, back in the zone, baby. I was like flicking the on switch. I was ready to go. Problem is, men and women are different. Yeah, in fact, I heard a speaker say, if two people who are the same get married, one of them's not necessary. Relational psychologists tell us that we're attracted to our opposite because they complete us. They complete us. There's actually a psychological component in our very psyche that seeks someone who can bring balance to our lives. Bring balance to our kids have no idea how lucky they are that they're not being raised by a single parent. No idea. Because by myself, I'm a disaster. With my bride, there's completeness, there's a oneness, there's something that comes to the table that balances me out. God knew it, he set it up, he put it together, and I'm eternally grateful because I'm married out of my league. It's a completeness that occurs there. So, the last thing I want to touch on very quickly is this. And you already know it, I'm just reminding you of it. Children will do what they see. Children will do what they see. And so, show of hands, how many of you, when you were growing up, saw and heard things from your parents and you thought to yourself, I'm never going to do that when I get older? How many of you did that? Good. How many of you, now that you're adults, do exactly the same thing your parents did? At one point in my life, I swore I would never tell my children, because I told you so. Please do not ask my kids how many times I say that today. The first time that came out of my mouth, I thought, oh no, I've turned into him. Children will do what they see. So it doesn't matter what we say, it's all about what we do. They will mimic the relationships they see in their parents, right? They will mimic that. That's the kind of relationship they will come to understand. Boys between the ages of 10 and 13 will determine what a man is and how a man treats a woman by the way they see husbands treating their wives. Very, very important factor. Got a story, honey?
I got a great story. As I noted that I'm a pre-K teacher, and this summer I am working in a camp, summer camps, and it's a whole lot of fun. You have different kids every week, so it's an adventure every week. But this really neat thing happened last week. I was working with 3- and 4-year-olds, and this little boy and little girl just really liked to play together. They were very compatible, and they were always playing out in the playground. Well, we do have a snack time in the middle of our day, and at the table that we were setting up for snack time, the little boy sat down, and the little girl kind of walked over, was looking, trying to decide where to sit. It's very important at 3 and 4 where you sit. And he looks up, he jumps up, he goes over to the empty chair next to him, he slides it out, he puts his hand gently on her back, guides her into the chair, pushes it back in, and goes back and sits down. The other teacher and I just looked at each other like mouths open, you know? We know, and both of us said, he's seen this at home. This is not something this 3-year-old boy just decided to do. He's seen it at home. He's seen that when a man cares for a woman, this is what he does to take care of her. So it was just a perfect example of that. So, you have the clicker? All right. I am now going to need 2 volunteers from the audience, 2 very brave people. Actually, what I have to do is not very difficult. There's 2 things you need: the ability to come up on stage and the ability to use your hands. So 2 people. Come on, 2 people. All right, come on up. We got them. I've got to reorient my mic here, so this will just take a second. Can you still hear me? Okay. All right, who's going to be the first? I won't say victim. We'll let you do the first part. Everybody recognize what this is? Toothpaste. Okay. I need you to open this toothpaste and pour it onto that plate. All of it? All of it. All right. Look at well, she's going right to town. She wastes no time. There is no hesitation. She's got it. Look at that. Everybody give a round of applause. Woo! That was awesome. All right. The hard work is done. Now it's your turn. Ready? Okay, you have to get all that toothpaste back in this tube. Now, I did bring some tools for him. We've got tape, a screwdriver, a spoon. We have antibacterial. We have minion Tic Tacs. Popsicle stick. You pick. I need all of it back into the tube. Drum roll. He's looking around. He's got a little pair of pliers here. How you gonna? Yeah. He's trying to squish the bottom with the pliers. There's stickers up here. Yep, that doesn't seem to be the way he's gonna go. Oh, wait, a skewer. There we go. This will be just as quick as taking it out of the tube, I'm sure. What do you think? Yeah. Do you think? How long were you guys thinking we were going to be here tonight? Just saying. Oh, he's asking for help.
I need help.
Actually, that's all you have to do. That's good enough. I appreciate it.
Oh, that is? Oh.
That's good. That's good. Give them a round of applause for their very kind willingness to come up here. Because I gave them no warning. They just came up and volunteered to help me with my toothpaste example here. Thank you very much. Okay. There. The tube of toothpaste is like the words that we use. Sorry, I got to get my. There, can you hear me again? The tube of toothpaste is like the words that we use. A lot of time, it is easy for them to just spill right out of us. It doesn't take much to just put them right out there. But it's really, really difficult to take them back. People hear them. They know they've been said. They've felt their blow. You can't just stop what you said and turn it around. So think about it for a minute. How many of you have ever said something that you wish you could take back? Anybody? Okay, good. Then I'm not talking just to myself. So we have to make sure that we're being a little more deliberate about what we say. And you say, sure, that's great, Amy. Night's over. You helped me a whole lot. It's actually our nature to correct people and not to encourage people. So I want to give you some ideas here about what to do. And we're going to use this symbol here, HALT. It's like on a stop sign, HALT. And we're going to look at it in a couple different ways here. First of all, before you speak, you need to stop. HALT. Stop. We need to slow down before we speak. And I'm not even going to get into the part of texting and messaging and all that stuff. This is just our words we're talking about today. So we need to stop just for a moment. So I'm going to give you a little scenario here. It's a Saturday. You had to go out and work. You ended up being in traffic for an hour and a half on the way home, and you are tired. You just want to relax. You want to get home and relax. You walk into the living room, and there's the juice glass from this morning and the pizza box with still some pizza in it, probably from lunch, maybe some snack bags over here. There's some papers here and a newspaper there. The TV's on blaring. Don't say it. What do you want to say? No, don't say it yet. No. Please don't say, what have you been doing all day long? Do not go into a rant and a rave. What you really need to do is halt right there. You see, when we're in the best of moods, when everything's butterflies or your team just won the Super Bowl, it is very easy for us to calmly go, oh, we can deal with this. But when you are hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, H-A-L-T, halt, it is very difficult to handle these situations. So you have to assess the situation. Halt. Think. Say a little prayer under your breath. No, this is not the time to pray that God will strike your spouse with lightning. This prayer is all about you. This is the, Lord, help me to use my words wisely. Lord, empower me to stop, to think, to be fair. Lord, may it be your words and not mine that come out next. Halt. Now, if you know that you are hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, and you can take that breath and pause, You may then walk into that room, pick up a piece of pizza with a little smile on your face, hoping they'll stop you if the dog walked through it. Sit down and eat a slice and chat before you deal with the beautiful environment around you. But if you were the one who was home and your spouse comes into this situation, it's a little different. I mean, maybe if you two have talked about halt, you can just put up the sign, halt! Otherwise, you need to calmly talk to the person and say, let's talk about this later. You don't have to just ignore that there's something you need to talk about or work through. But this may not be the time and place. When anyone is hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, that is not the prime time to talk about a difficult situation. Because again, we want to convict the other person. We do not want to encourage them. Okay, so when it is time for us to deal with it later, we want to deal with it carefully and lovingly. And that can get us back to the prayer time and some of the other things that we'll be going over. We don't have to accept bad issues or bad situations, so if you need to leave a situation, that is fine as well. God does reveal to us in the Bible repeatedly that our words, there's power in our tongue. We see it in Ecclesiastes 5:3, Proverbs 10:19, Matthew 12:36. But right tonight, we are going to look at Proverbs 18:21. It's up here for us. The words of the reckless pierce like swords. The words of the reckless pierce like swords. Another translation is, careless words stab like a knife. Careless words stab like a knife. You're dumb. You're ugly. You're stupid. You're fat. You're ugly. You're fired. You never do anything right. You don't understand a thing. I don't love you. I don't need you. I don't even care about you. Pause for a moment. See if you can remember a time when words stabbed you like a knife. You may remember the exact situation. You may see the colors that were on the wall. You may know the exact outfit you were wearing. You may know every person who was around. You may remember word for word the situation. It may even be making a physical impact on you right now thinking about it. One of the things that we want you to carry away from this evening is you don't ever want to bring your spouse to that point where they feel like your words have stabbed them like a knife. So in order to not do that, let's get a little more information from John.
Thank you. You know, it's great to be able to talk about all of this, but if you're anything like me, we're talking about changing an ingrained behavior. Because I had for years and years and years, I spoke the way that I spoke, I thought the way that I thought, I acted the way that I acted, and so getting to a place where I needed to change my behavior was a very, very challenging and difficult thing for me to do. Once I understood there were some things I was bringing into the marriage that were toxic, that was not aiding in the marriage, then getting to that place where I had to figure out, now what do I do about that, was a real, real challenge for me. We want to spend a moment talking about how do we make a behavior shift? How do we actually, once we've decided that we want to contribute in the marriage, to our marriage in a different way, how do we make that behavior shift? And you know, it's interesting because I'm remembering a story that a marital speaker was talking about at another conference, and he said after the conference, a woman came up to him and she said, you know, that's all really, really great stuff that you're talking about, but I want you to know I am so far gone in this relationship, I intend to file for divorce as soon as I get home. I'm so angry. The speaker said, well, ma'am, I'm really sensing that this has been a burden for you. She said, absolutely right. It has been a burden, and nothing you said today is going to change that for me. He said, well, it also sounds to me like you're really angry with your husband. She said, I'm very, very angry with my husband. He said, well, if you really, really want to hurt your husband, here's what you do. Her ears perked up. She got a little interested there for a moment. She said, well, what do I do? He said, well, listen, when you get home tonight, don't file for divorce. What I want you to do is spend the next 30 days treating him like he's a king. Get him coffee, fetch his slippers, make him a sandwich, do whatever, just make him feel. And then, at the end of the 30 days, when you come back and you file for divorce, it's going to hurt that much more. She thought, never thought of that. It's a great idea. So she went off. It was a few months later before the speaker saw this woman again and said, hey, it's good to see you. Tell me, how are things going at home? Did you file for divorce? And she looked at him in great shock and said, file for divorce? Are you kidding me? That is the nicest, sweetest man I have ever met in my entire life. When we talk about behavior change in a marriage, it's really important for those of us who are here tonight to understand that the responsibility is ours. It's not about changing our spouse's behavior. It's about changing our behavior. And when you start to treat your spouse in a way that is encouraging, motivating, uplifting, you start to get back what you're putting out. Is anybody following me here? It doesn't matter if you're not getting it right now. You see, it's like a fire. A fire can only burn if there's fuel. Remove the fuel from the fire, and it'll eventually kindle out and become controllable, right? It'll just dwindle out. And what we've discovered is that in most marital conflict, there are two people on the dance floor, and they're both stepping on each other's toes. One person has to decide to break the cycle. One person has to decide, I am choosing to behave differently in this relationship. One person has to decide, I'm really responsible to God for how I behave. I'm not responsible for how anyone else behaves. And so when you start to make those kinds of decisions, you start to understand how powerful you can be in contributing to your marital relationship. So let's take a look at the first tip that we want to share today, and that's this. If you want to change your behavior, you got to change your perspective. If you want to change your behavior, you got to change your perspective. What's your perspective in your marriage today? How do you view your spouse, your potential spouse, your significant other? How do you view that particular individual? Listen, I've got something important to share with you tonight, and if you remember nothing else, I really want you to remember this. So let's do an exercise. Everybody hold up a finger. Good. All right, just now put your finger in your right ear. Okay, and now keep it there and listen very carefully. Your spouse is not your enemy. Okay, you can take it out now. See, I got to do that, Pastor Scott, otherwise it goes in one ear and out the other. Your spouse is not your enemy. When you change your perspective on your spouse, in fact, when you realize that the opposite is true, and that is that your spouse is a gift from God. And when you start to see him or her that way, it changes the way you behave. It changes the way you think. It changes the words that you choose to use. Your spouse is not your enemy. This was hard for me to learn. I'm highly competitive. Highly, highly competitive. And so a lot of our marital intense conversations, right, I had to win. How many of you know that whenever I won, I lost? Right? I'm like, wait, didn't I just win that argument? Why am I sleeping in the garage? Your spouse is a gift from God. When you change your perspective, you change your behavior. It becomes a very, very important and significant thing for us to be able to do. And not only that, but it changes the way you react to your spouse. It changes the things you say. It changes the things you do. It changes the way you think. There's a story of an elderly couple. They've been married for a very, very, very long time. They're rocking on the porch, and they're just hanging out on a Sunday afternoon, just enjoying the day. And the wife's thinking, and she turns to her husband, she goes, I remember when you used to nibble on my ear. A moment goes by, and husband gets up, starts walking inside. She's worried she might have upset him. She's like, where are you going? He said, I'm going in to get my teeth. Sorry, I'm having fun. When you change your perspective, you change your behavior. That's the first thing. How are you viewing your spouse? Change your perspective, change your behavior. All right, a couple other things that we ought to know when we think about that, and that's this. Amy shared with you the first part of Proverbs. right? But God didn't leave us there. He didn't leave us just understanding that word stab. He went on to help us to understand the other half of the equation. And that's what you see here. The tongue of the wise brings healing. The tongue of the wise brings healing. You got a decision to make tonight. Do you want your life, your conversation, the words that you choose to reflect the first half of that proverb statement or the second half of that proverb statement? It's a choice that we got to make. Every time we interact with our spouse or significant other, our fiance, whatever the case may be, any other human being, we can actually look at it through that filter and determine, is today the day that I want to be doing part A of the sentence or part B of the sentence? Do I want to stab like a knife or a sword, or do I want to bring healing? It's a choice we make. We can choose to bring healing into any given situation. Well, that's great, John. Well, how do we do that? I'm glad you asked. Let me tell you. There's a couple of tools that we want to share with you tonight that we believe will help you to do that. And that's about developing habits. In fact, behavioral psychologists tell us that if we do anything 35, 40, 45 days straight in a row, we develop a new habit. And if you've ever hurt your hand and had to brush your teeth with your other hand, you know it was pretty ugly at the start, but you eventually learn some competencies around using the other hand. It's the same thing about developing a new behavior. If we can get ourselves to do it over and over and over again and keep it in the forefront of our minds, then we can develop a new way to interface, interact, and deal with others. This is a model that Amy and I call Spot It, Say It, Track It. Let me tell you briefly what each of these is really talking about. You see, the problem that we have as human beings in the United States of America is that we do this thing called sorting on the negative. Kind of like an Excel spreadsheet. We go through our day, we go through our relationships, and the things that are bad, the things that are negative, the things that are broken are the things we tend to pay attention to. Well, if that's true, then that means the conversations I'm having with my spouse are oftentimes about things that are bad, things that are broken, things that aren't going well. And if that's the only kind of conversation I'm having with my spouse, it's no wonder that we may be in a challenging, stressful situation. My friends, I want to encourage you to do this. Get your mind to start sorting on the positive. Get your mind to start sorting on the positive. When you start looking for good things, you start seeing good things. When was the last time you gave your spouse, significant other, a compliment? Maybe it's a compliment for the most basic kinds of things that they do day in and day out, right? So when you start looking for it, you start to see it. When you start looking for it, you start to see. You know people who just seem to see nothing but negative things all day long? Have you ever spoken to some of those folks? Oh, yeah. Fun to be around, aren't they? No, they're not. And then you know people who can get a flat tire on their way to work, right, and just walk in and just be, whoo-hoo, I got a flat tire on my way to work, but you know what? I'm glad to be here. Just spent 3 hours on 66, but woo, at least I wasn't in the accident. And if you know anybody like that, they've usually figured out how to be happy or they're on pharmaceuticals. I highly recommend you don't ask. Let's just go with the first one and assume that they figured out a way to be happy. It's a choice we make, my friends, in our attitude. And so when we start looking for the good things, when we start looking for the blessings in life, when we start looking for the blessings in our partner, we start to see them. And not only that, but we'll start to see more and more of them, and more and more of them. And before you know it, the blessings start to overweigh the little stuff. All of a sudden, the fact that you're leaving your socks out or the fact that you didn't rinse out your orange juice glass takes on a little less significance, right? And the things that are going well, the gifts that they bring to the table take on even more significance. By the way, what is it with the toilet paper thing? Is there like a scientific reason behind whether it needs to face out or face in? See me afterwards, because oh yeah, the little things. So back to the little things. Right? They tend to take on less and less significance. So start to spot it. Now here's the deal. When you start spotting it, you got to start saying it. I don't know if you've got this problem, but I have a significant issue with not saying stuff. I have this issue with my children. I have this issue at work. In fact, that's where it came to be. I had team members bring this to my attention. You know, they're like, John, you tell us that you talk about us all the time. The leaders above you tell us that you talk about us all the time, and you say wonderful things about us. Is there a time when you're going to talk to us about us? I realize they're absolutely right. I love talking about my phenomenal kids, Do I spend enough time talking to my phenomenal kids, telling them that they're phenomenal kids? I love bragging about my wife. Do I spend enough time bragging to my wife that I like to brag about my wife? So when you spot it, you got to start saying it, because that's where the significance occurs, using and choosing the right words to compliment on a regular basis. You got a story, honey?
I got a story. I'm going to just say it. There are many things I love about my husband. But one thing that he did long ago with our children that is such a blessing to me, he taught our children to say, "Good dinner, Mommy, thank you." It's just a small couple of words, right? But to this day, now my kids are 24, 22, 20, and 16. Every meal they say, good dinner, or good lunch, or good food, whatever. Thanks, Mom. He had to think about that ahead of time and how important that was. And it's very impactful for me. But now when my children say it to me, they've learned how important it is to compliment the meal. They've learned that it's important to compliment their mother because their father compliments their mother. So every time they say it, I actually get those little warm fuzzies from my husband, even though he could be perfectly quiet, because they're going to tell me it was a good dinner even if I fed them Brussels sprouts.
I got to tell you, it's not that hard to do if you've ever had her cooking. She's pretty good. I'm pretty spoiled. I confess. Yeah, my mother came to this country. When she came to this country, she was a seamstress and a live-in housekeeper, and so she had to learn to cook and cook a lot of different dishes. So I went from my mother's house to college, where I started dating this beautiful young lady, and then eventually would marry her 5 years later. And so I went from one good cook to another good cook. Life is good. We don't even like eating out. I mean, we rarely eat out. I mean, life is good. But that's something that's important as well. When you're going to say it, it's got to be true. Because you know when someone's making it up, don't you? You know when they're fluffing, they're pulling the wool over your... It's got to be authentic, and it's got to be true. So spot it and say it. Now, the third part of this is track it. This is all nice and wonderful, and you might leave here tonight going, I think I made a commitment to start saying nice things to my wife. And then it might be 3 months from now. How you doing with that? How am I doing with what? Like the story of the couple that were having an argument. She said, "You don't tell me you love me anymore." He goes, "I told you 30 years ago when I married you. Why do I have to repeat it?" In some cases, we got to track it in order to make it real. Got to track it in order to make it real. In my case, there were a couple of ways I had to track it. I wear a rubber band almost every day to this day. That's a behavior modification device for me. Right? It was a reminder. It helped me to clean up my language. Right? When we started having kids and I started learning that they were going to grow up to be like me, I realized I didn't like me that much. There's absolutely no way in the world I needed another 3 or 4 of me running around. I didn't even like one of me. And I had to learn how to clean up my language. And so the rubber band helped me to clean up my language. That's a track-it mechanism where I have an immediate response to an undesired behavioral catalyst, right? And it's funny. I knew that it worked because now when I stub my toe, I'm like, cheese! Ooh, not what I used to say. There are other track-it devices you might want to use. In fact, I have moved on to a different one that I've been using for years now, and I literally 7 days a week track the behavior that I'm working on. I track it on a graph sheet. I spend some time during my meditation prayer time, and at the end of that, I look at my sheet and I say, "Okay, John, you're working on these 2 things. How you doing?" And I chart it every day. Did I do it, and how well did I do? And I can see over the course of 45 days. Why? Because I'm looking to develop a new habit. I can see over the course of 45 days if I'm doing all right, if I'm not doing all right. There's some things that I'm going, "Man, John, you just did 45 days of great stuff," and I put it away. And then all of a sudden, in about 5 more months, it's back on the sheet. Sometimes that'll happen, right? But tracking it means measuring it because we behave to what we measure, right? And so tracking it is a very, very important piece of it. We're going to wrap up our time with you together now. And we just have a word that we want to close with for the men and the women that are here tonight.
Well, ladies, I get to talk to you. That's only fair, right? I'm so glad that we were able to come here this evening, and I hope that you're encouraged, as it says up here, from this time. Some of the things I'd like to encourage you on are to show respect for your husband, Now, in some cases, it may be more difficult than others, but find the little things. Does he keep the car shined up? Does he fill the gas tank? You don't have to wait until he's painted the entire house inside and out to find some little thing that he's doing well. But encourage and respect him for it. Let him know you've noticed. Maybe get some little Post-it notes to put up, leave a little message here or there. Gosh, I really appreciate you taking care of that for me. That made my day so much better. That was so thoughtful of you. Those small words, those pieces of encouragement are so important to help your spouse feel special, to feel respected, to want to do more. When they hear good words, they want to make you happy. Remember, women, if you treat your husband like the king of your castle, he will treat you like a queen.
Very good. And men, my closing words for you tonight is this. Your wife wants to be nurtured. She wants to be listened to. She wants to be heard. She wants you to understand her love language. And if you're not familiar with the whole concept of love language, I recommend you go look it up. Just be careful where you land in Google. But if you can get the legitimate stuff, there's some great information around there around how we all like to communicate within our love languages, how we like to exist. And so I encourage you to become an expert in the art of nurturing and loving your wife. This has been a pleasure for us. We spent some time talking about the problem, but then we talk about the solution. We spent some time talking about the beginning of Proverbs, that our words can stab, but we can choose to be wise and have our words be healing. We appreciate you allowing us to spend this time with us. I'll call Pastor Scott up to close us in prayer.
Thank you, John and Amy. And you can stay standing. We're about ready to go. I also want to thank you, John. John has invested a lot of time and his abilities in helping our staff at our church, donating his services to us, and has been a great impact on me and our pastors, our directors, and all of our staff. And I just wanted to publicly say thank you for that, John. And Amy, thank you for letting him come and do that, because many times it's after his pay job. So thank you. Amen. Amen. Well, last week we challenged you to pray for one another, look each other in the eye and pray for each other together. I hope that's something that you have begun or maybe kick-started in your relationship. And John and Amy have given us many wonderful tools to work in the area of loving each other, respecting each other, especially with our words. And so I just want to encourage you. Lila could not be here tonight. She's in Austin, Texas. We'll be back together again. But I'm going to share with her. And I believe it's taped, isn't it? It's videotaped. It will be available. So I just want to encourage you to, it's great to spend an hour and a half together, but the real payback is what we do when we walk out of here and what we implement. And so let's go in prayer together, and let's invite, again, the Lord Jesus and the power of the Holy Spirit to help us. Amen. Heavenly Father, we thank you for what we heard tonight. We thank you for this last hour and a half and the fun and the information, the encouragement, the challenge. And now we invite you, Lord, through the power of the Holy Spirit, to bring back to our remembrance as we've taken notes or however we do it. Lord, I pray you'd help us now this next week to take some action and to trust you. Lord, we know you are in us, empowering us every step of the way. Lord, we ask now that you would continue to help us, work in us and through us, Lord, that we can see our marriage grow to that next level of health. Well, thank you for it, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. God bless you. Thank you for being with us here in week 2. Next week, we're going to have some serious fun. Lila and I are going to be here. Hope you'll join us. God bless you.